So, in the very early morning hours of December 21, 1935, New York's Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, he was a good man. He had come into office promising to do something about the Mafia, which was enormous at the time in the 30s, and powerful too. Prohibition had made them rich and got them better organized. They were strangling the city. He said he was going to do something about it, and he did. So he walks into the Bronx Terminal Market, which is this huge warehouse kind of thing, filled with all these foods that were going to be shipped out into the city and other cities as well. And he's surrounded by cops and he's surrounded by a lot of newspaper reporters. He hopped up on the back of a truck and he said, "This is my announcement. Starting December 26th, New York City was going to have a total ban on the sale, display, possession of artichokes because he said they posed a serious threatening emergency to the city because it was controlled by, these are his words, but a monopoly of doubtful legality, the mob, to control who wanted this doubtful legality, wanted to control the price and distribution. They were engaged in violence and intimidation to do that. So a lot of people, especially the press corps, which was largely a waspy affair until the 60s, they they didn't get it. And so the mayor was ridiculed for this. They said, "Shouldn't you be doing something else? Is it a national depression going on? People are really the artichoke." They didn't understand that, the Italian population had exploded in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York State, Boston, Philadelphia, and New York sent food to these places. And the artichoke was a staple for these people, for the northern and southern Italians. And the mob was making a fortune on these things. They had controlled that national artichoke market for about 2 decades, and they were shaking down. They were taking a bite out of everybody: growers, distributors, and finally the consumers. Something had to be done. So that's why the mayor cracked down on these guys. In around 1910, more or less, the Morello Terranova crime family was one of the first major crime mafia, I should say, operations in New York, if not in the United States, grabbed control of the artichoke trade, something they brought over from Italy, by imposing an import tax of an average of around $800 per carload that came in by rail from California. So by the time LaGuardia's ban came around, prosecutors had figured out that the New York Mafia was making around $6 million a year just on artichokes. And then, as I say, there's all these other things they were moving in on: citrus fruits, avocados, olive oil, cheeses. It just didn't end. Something had to be done. So Ciro Terranova, the so-called artichoke king, he bragged about what he was doing. He ran the Morello Terranova crime syndicate, and he barely avoided getting whacked at a Coney Island restaurant in 1931. He decides, "I've had enough," and he jumps ship. And these young Turks who are behind him, they didn't have the contacts with Italy. Artichokes wasn't really where I mean, there's money to be made in so many other things rather than having to do with California, railroad tracks, and everything else. They really weren't all that interested. What they really lost interest when they watched Terranova's successor, this guy Joe Castaldo, face federal antitrust indictments for being involved in the artichoke market. And a lot of them just gave up after that. The ban, by the way, even though it was ridiculed, it worked. 3 days into it, the mob started to let up on the stranglehold. And then the ban was lifted. And eventually that market, just that racket, I